The Mexican government has defended the decision to release El Chapo Guzman's son. His drug cartel forced the move after a deadly shootout with armed forces Thursday. CBS News' Errol Barnett sat down with Mexico's former foreign minister, Jorge Castañeda. He asked how this could unfold in the streets of Mexico.
What is the difference from Thursday's gun battle to what we've seen before?
Well, first of all, this is a big city. It's a city of 500,000 people that was literally taken over by the Sinaloa cartel, closing off the entrances to the city, taking a series of strategic points in the city to free one of their leaders, Chapo Guzmán's younger son. This was an enormous humiliation for the Mexican army. It's an enormous defeat for the army and for the government also, because this time, for the first time that I can recall, the Mexican government gave back the guy they had captured. They had captured him. They had him in their custody, and they gave him back.
How do you explain that?
Well, there are many explanations circulating. It's hard to say. One is that they had 5 or 6 soldiers taken hostage. They shot one of them, sent the video to the government and said, we've got 5 more. The other is that the way they took over the city was so dramatic and became so dangerous for the city's inhabitants, for everybody, that the president of Mexico decided that he was not willing to pay that higher price, that's what he said, just to capture one drug kingpin, which probably by the time he actually made that decision was probably, I would tend to think, the right decision. But this has never happened before.
I was going to ask you what you think of this decision to give the so-called rat back, considering how such a high-value target he is.
Well, once they had the hostages and once his armies had taken over the city, probably the president had no choice. There would have been a bloodbath just to keep him, and they might have lost him anyway. The mistake was to try and go and get him without overwhelming force, and if you don't have it, then don't do it. And President López Obrador had been saying several months ago that he was no longer trying to pursue this high-value target strategy, the so-called kingpin strategy that the United States had imposed on Mexico 10 or 12 years ago, because it hadn't worked. And he was right when he said this doesn't work, but there he goes and does it again. And it was incredibly humiliating.
The Sinaloa cartel has been described as one of, if not the most powerful illicit drug cartel on the planet. What is it about this cartel that makes it so powerful, so influential, and so able to elude capture?
Well, first of all, it has deep roots in the state of Sinaloa, the capital of which is the city of Culiacán, and the outside areas. People like them. People root for them. People support them because they bring money, because they do good works, they do all sorts of things, firstly. Secondly, they have enormous resources at their command, and they use them strategically. They don't go around killing people just for the hell of it. They don't do that. They do their business. They're businessmen.
Bullet point to me some of the resources they have available to them.
Well, hard to say how much. Chapo's fortune was estimated at well over $1 billion. I'm not sure that ever existed, but you can see in the footage, you can see pickup trucks, you can see Barrett machine guns, which can bring down a Black Hawk helicopter. You can see radio communications that are very sophisticated and very widespread. You can see the number of people they have. These were literally hundreds of hitmen in the city sets last night. So that takes a lot of money. They have all this money, and they have it because they are deeply involved in transiting cocaine from South America, heroin from poppy, which is cultivated in the mountains, fentanyl that comes from China and is sent through Mexico up here, and other activities also. They're a big business. They have a lot of resources.
Now, you've touched on this already, but I just want to come back to it. What were the major government failures here in its mission?
The Mexican government made several mistakes. The first one, in my opinion, is to go after a kingpin. It's not worth it, ever. It makes for great headlines. We captured Chapo, we did this, we killed so-and-so. It doesn't make any difference. On the contrary, it probably generates more violence. Secondly, if you want to do it, if you decide for any reason because the Americans asked you to do it or forced you to do it, you have to do it, then go in with overwhelming force. They did not go in with overwhelming force. And thirdly, the president has to act more responsibly. He was taking a commercial flight from Mexico City to Oaxaca, which is an hour-long flight, while this was happening, with no phones, no communication. Everybody had to wait until he landed to decide what to do. Well, that's not serious. You can't wage a war taking,
being disconnected.
Being disconnected. It's silly. It's infantile.
What do you make of the explanation from the president that the decision to release the so-called rat saved lives and that ultimately this was a mission worthwhile?
Well, I tend to agree with the president that this was the right decision once he made the wrong decision to go after him in the first place. It was not worth it to go after him in that fashion. Once they were in the mess they were, with perhaps soldiers taken hostage, the city all up in arms, closed off from the rest of the country, with hundreds of hitmen from the Sinaloa cartel taking it over, by that time, I think he had no choice but to give him back. But of course, this is incredibly humiliating for the Mexican military and for the government itself. This is the first major crisis that this new government faces in Mexico, and it's not going to be the last one, by the way.
One source tells CBS News it's possible that there was not just one El Chapo son detained. There's a possibility that there were two. Do you have any information on that?
Well, the version is that there were two of them, Ivan and Ovidio, and that Ivan was able to escape, but when he realized that his little brother had been left behind, he said, no, I'm going back for him. I'm not leaving him there. And he called in all the reinforcements from outside the city. And that's when the firefight erupted. That's what they're saying now. Nobody has confirmed this. The government is really not informing the country about what happened. But since all of this is on, people were on their cell phones were taking videos. They're all over social media in Mexico. There's videos of the soldiers fraternizing with the hitmen. There's videos of children on the street. A little boy saying, "Daddy, why do I have to be on the lying face down? What's going on? What's happening?" There's footage of buildings going up in smoke. All of this was filmed live.
Sources tell CBS News in the U.S. government that the U.S. doesn't necessarily know where the so-called rat is, but they are trying to track him. They're trying to help the Mexican government find him, but they don't have a lock on him now after this firefight. What happens next?
There's an extradition request out for him by the U.S. government since September of 2018. This is not new. The new Mexican government had decided not to pursue this kingpin strategy. Somebody convinced them to do it. They failed miserably and were humiliated doing it. Hopefully, they'll not continue to do so, because if they continue, if the United States government pressures Mexico to go and find him under any circumstances, it'll be a tremendous firefight, and nobody understands, so what? What's the purpose of it? All you get is more violence, because they fight to see who's the successor.
But the subtext of what you're saying then sounds like is give up.
No, not give up. Reach some sort of understanding with the cartels, which is what has been going on in Mexico and in Colombia and in many countries for the past 50 or 60 years.
An understanding being?
You do your job, we do our job. Don't meddle in our affairs, and we won't meddle in your affairs. Your job is to send drugs to the United States. That's what you guys do for a living. They don't sell in Mexico, huh? Americans want to stop drugs entering the United States? Stop them on the U.S. side of the border. Bring back the troops from Afghanistan, but put them on the U.S. side of the border.
The American appetite for drugs is what's fueling this.
What's fueling it, but the United States doesn't want to pay the cost of stopping the drugs from entering on the U.S. side of the border. It wants that to be done in Mexico. Why should we continue to do it? This is the mess we have because of that.
What happens next in the wake of all this?
One of the most serious consequences of this defeat or humiliation for the Mexican army and the government is that now the cartels in general and organized crime in general knows that they will cave. They caved and they will continue to cave. they released a guy, a high-value target that they had tried to capture and had captured. And given hostages, or given the way the town was taken, or given the scandal that was emerging in social media, they decided to release him and give him back. And that means that other people will start doing exactly the same thing.
They've shown a weakness.
They've shown a weakness. Famous theory, you don't negotiate with whatever, terrorists, kidnappers, or cartels. Well, if you don't negotiate with them, then don't negotiate with them. But if you negotiate once, you're creating an incentive for everybody to do this.
Minister, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Errol.